Hey everyone, it is late at night and I'm Norman. I have just been spared from having to perform a hideous task against a few watches that have been sitting on my shelf. This is a win-win scenario. Let me explain. So a bit ago I did a video on some non-running watches that have been sitting on my shelf forever, and I half expected that video to not do terribly well. I didn't think a whole lot of people would be interested in looking at non-runners that have been sitting on my shelf. But surprisingly, a lot of you were interested in that video, which is good because you know what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to in this video. So in that video, I showed you some watches that are not running and have been sitting on my shelf, and I'm just kind of getting tired of seeing them there. They're taking up space, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. However, I also couldn't bring myself to just packing them away in a box and throwing it in the garage. I feel like that's almost kind of the same thing. But what's really cool is after that video came out, one of you reached out to me. So a viewer of this channel is embarking on his watchmaking journey. He's just beginning, and he was interested in purchasing these non-running watches for a very reasonable price, basically just enough to make the hassle of shipping them worth it for me. So it's a win-win. He gets some very inexpensive watches to work on and learn with, and I don't have to throw these watches away. So at the time of this recording, I'm about to ship them off to him, so tomorrow I'll be dropping them off. And I thought before I let them go, I will share them with you one last time because there's a piece that I'm going to give him that wasn't featured in my previous video. So I'm actually shipping him two watches that do run. One of them needs its crown stem reinserted correctly because I did it incorrectly. And it doesn't wind anymore. But prior to me doing that, it did work. It's a cheap Russian watch, so it definitely needs a servicing. But he has an example of a piece that's actually running. I know that when you're first learning, it's a good idea to take a movement that's running well, not a movement that already has issues. So if you purchase a super affordable movement that's brand new to work on, the good thing is you have a decent base to start with. So you can put it on a time grapher and see that it's running fairly well. And then after you've taken it apart, put it back together and regulated it, you should see it running, hopefully, at least as well as it was before. It's much more difficult when you're working on a movement that may have all kinds of issues when you don't yet know what you're doing. But for the price that he paid for these watches, they would be good practice, at least taking movements apart and putting them back together and at least getting them running again. So I'm giving him the red dial watch that I got from India that worked for a few days and then didn't. It looks beautiful, and if he could get it running again, this would be a great piece to wear because it does look really good on the wrist. I also sold him the quote Oris, which also looks very beautiful. It has crosshairs and that super fun seconds hand. And again, if he could get this piece working, this would be a cool watch to wear. These last two watches actually do run. The first one is my cushion case Vostok. And this watch, when it was working, got a lot of wrist time. It looks so amazing when it's on your wrist. It's actually a larger piece for a vintage watch, and it just looks amazing. However, the seconds hand was flopping around on it, so I opted to just make it a two-hander, 'cause I'm a weirdo. And unfortunately, something went wrong when I put the crown back in. It worked for a little while, but then it just locked up and you can't wind it anymore. So clearly I didn't put it back together right. And the final watch that I sold him is actually a piece that a different viewer was interested in, but kind of changed his mind because This one probably needs a servicing, and he wasn't quite ready to dive into that just yet. But it did remind me that I have this watch sitting in a box, so I decided to get it out and bundle it with these other watches. And that watch is my Pabada. And this is a pretty cool looking watch too. Kind of the marine style, or nautical style, sea captain style. The crown could use being replaced. All of the plating has come off of it, so it's just brass. But I guess that kind of works with the naval, nautical, sea captain look of this watch. But this is a runner. It actually works, but surely it needs a servicing. So I'm hoping that the viewer is successful in trying to service these watches, and maybe he'll be kind enough to keep me updated, because there might be some interesting stories to tell from his efforts. Tomorrow I'll get these shipped off and we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.